Reeva Steenkamp was a 29-year-old woman from South Africa. She was intelligent, confident, and full of purpose. Reeva worked as a model, a law graduate, and a reality television personality, but more than her public image, she was known by her friends and family as someone kind, thoughtful, and deeply passionate about justice. She often spoke openly against domestic violence and supported women's rights, believing strongly that women deserve safety, respect, and equality. Reeva had a bright future ahead of her. She was educated, ambitious, and emotionally aware. She believed in love but also in independence. Her life seemed balanced, a mix of professional success and personal growth. No one could have imagined how suddenly and violently that life would end. In early 2013, Reeva was in a relationship with Oscar Pistorius, a world-famous South African athlete. Oscar was internationally known as the Blade Runner, a Paralympic champion admired for overcoming physical disability. To the public, the relationship looked glamorous, a beautiful model and a celebrated sports star. But behind closed doors, things were not as perfect as they appeared. On the night of February 13, 2013, Reeva went to Oscar Pistorius' home in Pretoria. The next day was Valentine's Day. Reeva had planned something special. She even sent a loving message earlier that day expressing excitement and affection. There was no indication of fear, danger, or conflict in her words. That night would be her last. In the early hours of February 14th, multiple gunshots rang out inside the house. Neighbors later reported hearing screams, first a woman's scream, then gunfire. Moments later, silence. Reeva Steenkamp was shot 4 times through a locked bathroom door. She died at the scene. When police arrived, they found Reeva's body inside the bathroom. Oscar Pistorius was present, crying and distraught. Almost immediately, the story that would divide the world began to unfold. Oscar claimed it was a tragic mistake. He said he believed an intruder was hiding in the bathroom and fired his gun in fear. He said he did not know Reeva was inside, but investigators quickly noticed troubling details. Reeva was unarmed. She was trapped. The door was locked, and there were signs of an argument earlier that night. The case exploded across international media. How could a trained athlete, experienced with firearms, fire multiple shots without confirming a threat? Why were neighbors reporting screams of a woman before the shots? Why was Reeva in the bathroom, alone, in the middle of the night? As the investigation deepened, the image of a simple accident began to crumble.
Text messages between Reeva and Oscar revealed tension, fear, and emotional distress. Reeva had expressed concern about Oscar's temper and controlling behavior. Friends later testified that she sometimes felt scared during arguments. These revelations painted a far darker picture of their relationship. Reeva was no longer just a victim of a mistake. She was a woman whose voice had been ignored until it was too late. Her family was devastated. Her parents struggled to understand how their daughter, who had dedicated part of her life to speaking against abuse, became a victim of fatal violence herself. They demanded truth. They demanded accountability. South Africa and the world watched closely as the case moved forward. This was not just about a celebrity or a courtroom drama. It became a global conversation about domestic violence, power, fame, and justice. Many women saw themselves in Reeva. Many asked the same question: if this can happen to her, can it happen to anyone? The investigation would soon turn into one of the most closely followed trials in modern history. Every detail would be examined, every statement challenged, and the truth would slowly, painfully come to light. But for Reeva Steenkamp, the future had already been stolen. What remained was the fight for justice, and the question of whether the world would listen this time.
After Reeva Steenkamp's death, the investigation moved quickly, but it was anything but simple. From the moment police sealed off the house in Pretoria, the case attracted global attention. Journalists, legal experts, and the public all wanted answers. The key question was clear: was Reeva's death a tragic accident, or was it an act of intentional violence? Oscar Pistorius was taken in for questioning. His version of events remained consistent at first. He claimed he woke up during the night, believed there was an intruder in the bathroom, and fired his gun in panic. He said he did not know Reeva was behind the locked door. According to him, fear had taken over his judgment, but investigators were not convinced. Police found several troubling details inside the house. Reeva's phone, handbag, and sandals were discovered in the bedroom. This suggested she had not been leaving the house or hiding from an intruder. There were also signs that the couple may have been awake and interacting before the shooting. The positioning of objects raised questions about the timeline Oscar described. Neighbors came forward with statements that complicated the story even further. Multiple witnesses reported hearing a woman screaming before the gunshots. Some said the screams lasted several minutes. Others said they heard an argument. These accounts directly challenged Oscar's claim that he acted instantly in fear. Reeva's family, still in shock, traveled to South Africa seeking answers. Her parents struggled to understand how their daughter, a woman who openly spoke against domestic violence, had died in such a terrifying way. They listened closely as more information came out, hoping the truth would not be buried beneath fame and influence. Oscar Pistorius was formally charged with murder. He was released on bail, but strict conditions were placed on him. The court process began, and the case moved toward trial. Around the world, people debated the evidence. Some believed Oscar's story. Others believed Reeva had been killed during an argument. When the trial finally began in 2014, it was broadcast live and followed internationally. Every detail of the relationship, the night of the shooting, and Oscar's past behavior was examined in public. The prosecution argued that Oscar knowingly shot Reeva. They pointed out that he fired 4 shots, paused between them, and aimed at a closed door without confirming a threat. They emphasized that Oscar was trained in firearm use and understood the consequences of firing a weapon. According to the prosecution, this was not a moment of blind panic. It was an act of intent. They also presented text messages exchanged between Reeva and Oscar before her death. In these messages, Reeva expressed fear and emotional distress. She wrote about Oscar's jealousy, mood swings, and controlling behavior. One message revealed that she sometimes felt scared of him. These messages painted a picture of a relationship under strain, not a peaceful one. The defense countered by focusing on Oscar's physical disability and mental state. They argued that he was vulnerable, fearful, and prone to anxiety. They claimed his actions were the result of genuine panic, not anger or intent. Medical experts testified about his emotional condition and fear response. Oscar himself took the stand. He cried openly, describing his grief and saying he loved Reeva deeply. He maintained that her death was a terrible mistake that would haunt him forever. His testimony divided public opinion. Some viewers felt sympathy. Others felt his emotions were exaggerated and inconsistent. Reeva's family listened quietly through the proceedings. For them, every day in court was painful. They were not interested in Oscar's fame or excuses. They wanted accountability. They wanted the truth about what happened to their daughter in her final moments. In September 2014, the court delivered its verdict. Oscar Pistorius was found not guilty of murder, but guilty of culpable homicide, a charge similar to manslaughter. The judge ruled that while Oscar did not intend to kill Reeva specifically, his actions were negligent and unlawful. The verdict shocked many people. Some believed justice had failed Reeva. Others felt the decision reflected the complexity of the case. Protests and debates erupted across South Africa and beyond. Women's rights groups expressed anger and disappointment, arguing that the ruling sent a dangerous message about domestic violence and accountability. Oscar was sentenced to 5 years in prison, with a portion suspended. But the story did not end there. The prosecution appealed the verdict, arguing that the court had misapplied the law. They insisted that firing multiple shots through a door constituted intent to kill, regardless of who was believed to be behind it. In 2015, the appeal court agreed. Oscar Pistorius' conviction was upgraded to murder. Later, his sentence was extended to 13 years and 5 months in prison. This decision marked a turning point. Many felt that, at last, the justice system had acknowledged the seriousness of Reeva's death. For Reeva's family, the ruling brought a measure of closure, though never peace. No sentence could bring their daughter back, but the recognition of responsibility mattered. It meant that Reeva's life was not dismissed as an accident. Her name became a symbol of women whose voices are ignored, a symbol of how power and fame can complicate justice, and a symbol of why accountability matters.
Reeva Steenkamp was more than a headline. She was a daughter, a friend, an advocate, and a woman who deserved to live. And her story was not over yet because her legacy would go far beyond the courtroom.
After the final sentencing of Oscar Pistorius, the legal case officially came to an end, but Reeva Steenkamp's story did not. For her family, the verdict marked a moment of acknowledgement rather than relief. Justice, in their eyes, was never about punishment alone. It was about truth being recognized and Reeva's life being valued in a system that had initially failed to do so. Reeva's parents spoke publicly after the sentence was extended. They did not celebrate. Instead, they expressed quiet determination to ensure that their daughter would be remembered for who she truly was, not only as a victim, but as a woman with intelligence, compassion, and courage. They emphasized that Reeva had always spoken out against abuse and believed deeply in protecting women from violence. The irony of her fate was painful, but it strengthened their resolve. In the years following the trial, Reeva Steenkamp became a powerful symbol in conversations about domestic violence. Her name was mentioned in awareness campaigns, university discussions, and legal debates across South Africa and beyond. Advocacy groups used her story to highlight the warning signs of emotional control, fear within relationships, and how abuse does not always appear obvious from the outside. Reeva's story challenged a common myth that violence only exists in visibly broken or poor environments. She was educated. She was successful. She was confident. Yet, she still found herself in a dangerous situation. This reality forced society to confront an uncomfortable truth. Abuse can exist behind wealth, fame, and public admiration. Many women saw themselves in Reeva. They recognized the subtle fear described in her text messages. They understood the emotional tension, the apologies, and the hope that things would get better. Her story encouraged countless women to speak openly about their experiences, seek help, and trust their instincts. In this way, Reeva's voice continued to be heard even after her death. The media narrative also evolved over time. Initially focused heavily on Oscar Pistorius, public attention gradually shifted back to Reeva. Journalists began telling her story more responsibly, emphasizing her achievements and advocacy rather than reducing her to a footnote in a celebrity scandal. This shift mattered. It restored dignity to her name. Reeva's legacy also influenced legal discussions. Her case exposed weaknesses in how domestic violence is recognized and prosecuted. It highlighted how fame, power, and public sympathy can complicate justice. Legal experts used the trial to argue for clearer definitions of intent and stronger protections for victims. While change is slow, her case contributed to a broader push for accountability. Oscar Pistorius now serves his sentence largely away from public attention. Over time, the focus has moved away from him, where Reeva's family believes it always should have been. For them, remembering Reeva is not about reliving the crime, but about honoring her life. They remember her laughter. They remember her intelligence. They remember her courage. Reeva was more than a tragic headline. She was a woman who cared deeply about others and wanted to make a difference. She believed in justice and in the responsibility to protect those who cannot protect themselves. Today, when people search her name, they find more than court records. They find interviews, speeches, and messages she shared while alive. They see a woman who stood against violence and paid the ultimate price. Her story continues to educate and warn, reminding the world that silence can be deadly and that ignoring warning signs has consequences. Reeva Steenkamp's life ended in violence, but her impact did not. Her story has become a reminder that justice is not always immediate, but it must be pursued. That victims deserve to be heard, believed, and protected. And that society must do more than react after tragedy, it must act before it happens. This is why her story still matters. Not because of how she died, but because of what her life continues to teach. Reeva Steenkamp will always be remembered, not only as a victim of violence, but as a voice that continues to call for awareness, accountability, and change.